Okay, let's make a start. So thank you everyone for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon or morning, depending on where you're connecting from. So we're going to give you an overview today of the measurement standards that we have developed for retail media, which are currently open for public comment. So hopefully lots of you have seen these standards and reviewed the document, but if not, we're going to give you a good overview of what's included today and how we got there. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marie-Claire and I lead our retail media work tracks here at IAB Europe in collaboration with Yara De Hert, who is also on the webinar speaking today, who is our retail media consultant and has been leading our standardization work track. So I'm just going to very quickly tell you why we're talking about retail media standards. We ran a survey last summer amongst retailers and also retail media buyers. And what we found was that actually there's quite a lot of alignment on the fact that the lack of measurement standards is really a barrier to retail media investment and retail media scaling. So we felt like that was a really good place to start as IAB Europe to address that lack of measurement standardization, which is kind of why we're here today. So with that, I am going to hand over to Yara, who's going to talk through how we got to the standards and what's included and next steps.
Perfect. Thank you, Marie-Claire. So like Marie-Claire was saying, we basically knew that there was a pain point in the industry. And often when buyers are buying retail media, they're not getting to compare apples to apples. And we were trying to solve for that. One of the first things we did is bring the buy side's feedback all into one, and then took it into a standards workshop, which we held with about 15 retailers from across Europe on January 24th. It was a really good conversation because for the first time in the retailers that were there's words, they could be around the table and have an open dialogue of some of the pain points and see what other retailers are dealing with and why these topics are important. We then sent it out we compiled everything we learned on the 24th and sent it out on February 29th for retailer feedback, and then published a version on February 28th that has what you can see now. And we really encourage you to read it and give us as much feedback as possible, because by March 29th, we intend to close all of that, bring it in, find the commonalities, and release what we're calling V1 of standards. And the reason it's V1 is because we know there's going to be ever-evolving things, and we will like to add them to that document. There's also some topics that we've already identified that need to be on our roadmap. So please treat this as a V1, but give us as much feedback as possible so we could have an agreed upon common definition and basis. Going from there, we have a bit of a roadmap that we came up with in terms of some of the measurements. So Marie-Claire, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Yeah, sorry. So one of the things that we have here is retail media as we define it today. So there's CRM, in-store, digital in-store, on-site and off-site. We focused on that kind of purple box, on-site and off-site, for our V1. And going back to my comment earlier, topics like digital in-store we know are extremely important, and they are part of retail media and will be tackled next. And then we'll go to in-store, etc. But we've really tried to define as much as possible of on-site and off-site, and we know there's a bit more that needs to be done. So on to the next one, please. And here you'll see some of the metrics we were able to agree on. Some of them might seem basic to you. So media metrics like impressions, viewability, SIVT, clicks. These are all things that we had to write down, discuss the nuances, and I'll walk you through some of the nuances and have all retailers agree on. And some of the things are not as obvious. I know impressions is something that's been around for a very long time on the publisher side. But when we're talking about an impression on a retail site, there's some nuances, and that's what we wanted to put in our document to make sure that it's clearly captured. Same for attribution. We talked about some, and when we get into attribution, right, it's the first time that we're really able to tie a sale one-to-one, and we wanted to be extremely specific and have definitions that pertain to retail media. We then went into a slightly more advanced section beyond attribution, talk about insights, incremental ROAS, sales uplift, sales value. We defined those things, but we know there's more work to be done. And this is why incrementality is a wide encompassing, very important topic that we touched on. We have some definitions, there's more work that needs to be done. Things like audiences, ROPO, so research online, purchased in store, digital shelf ranking are all coming next. And then we talk about advanced insights and a future where brands are able to measure across multiple retailers and eventually across all of their digital media channels. And so we know that's the vision, and we know there's always going to be some sort of limitation in anything we do today in terms of being able to measure within one retailer's ecosystem and a lack of interoperability. But we have to start somewhere, and common definitions are the starting point, in our opinion. So if we go on to the next one, we did consult multiple bodies to do that. There's been some work done in the US that was used as the basis of our work. It wasn't done kind of in a vacuum. We also fed back that work to the US, and the US might include some of the definitions that we were able to push a little bit further. France has done a bit of work, and we've, of course, brought them into the conversation, as well as BVW, the local IAB in Germany. And finally, ISBA. ISBA is a demand side, a buy side body that is based in the UK that had done phenomenal work on what they're calling the framework of retail media and really framing retail media standards. And we've used that as a basis, and ISBA now is supporting anything we do, and they will back, the final version that we will have for release in April. So going on to the next slide, there's been a lot of noise already about this. You could see that, the release has captured some press, and we hope that it will get picked up even more and more so that we really are all adopting it as a recommended standard once it's fully released beyond the feedback period. So like I said in the beginning, we talked to 6 brands across verticals, had in-depth conversations, and picked up on some of the themes and the issues they were seeing. Some of the common themes were, we're not often comparing apples to apples. We are comparing apple to oranges, and that makes it really hard to buy. When we started retail media, it was all about ROAS, right? The one metric was click led to a sale, or impression led to a sale. Today, retail media is going after bigger and larger budgets, and it needs to fit into the total media mix. And so, again, we've laid the foundation to do that work. We don't think we've completely gone there. Incrementality, like we said, very important topic. ROPO, again, not captured yet, but a very important topic. Lookback windows is another one. So when you are measuring that ROAS, what are the lookback windows? And they differ from one retailer to another. They need to be flexible. We need to be able to incorporate our proprietary measurements as a brand. And that, is something that, we're starting to discuss and identify passes forward. And the list goes on. If we don't mind going to the next slide, I'm not going to go through every point. Recommendations that we came up with, like I said, were media metrics, attribution, and insights. Everything else we've put under future considerations. Under media metrics, what we've had is we started with the impressions that the measurements do not need adjustment. Ad impression, viewability for display and video ads, and video completion rate. We basically said there are industry definitions for those, and there are no nuances. So there is absolutely no need for us as a body to try to change them. You can adhere to standard IAB or MRC definitions. There's a link to those in the document, and that's it. We're not going to make any adjustments. Whereas there are some adjustments that need to be made to cater to the specificities of retail media. Click-through rate, CTR, viewability for sponsored products specifically, and SIVT. So if we go on from there, click-through rate. One of the things here is that, well, a click is a click. We all know that. But what constitutes a click in a retail media context? Is it a click on a branding element? Is it a click on a product? Is it a cart, an add to cart? Is it a PDP? And we said basically anytime you click on an element, it is a click, and you can attribute that. So whether your product has ended up in the cart, or you're landed on a product detail page, or you've landed on a branding page because you clicked on a branding element, that all of these things constitute a click. Then we went on to say viewability for sponsored product ads. Viewability is something that we think is table stakes, and we need to adhere, like I said, to IAB standards of being 50% in view. Now, the one nuance is sponsored products is usually sold on a performance basis, on a click-through, and that's the only time you only charge for click. So viewability was not necessarily incorporated in a retailer's reporting. And we agreed with the retailers that within the next year, when they report a view on a sponsored product, it needs to be viewable. Or at least if it's not, they need to note that it's not viewable, as that will impact ROAS when it's on a view base. And then there's SIVT, so filtration. And if a retailer is not in a position to report on SIVT, they need to make that clear. So there's a lot of scrolls, as we know, on retail side. There's a lot of people that are scraping for pricing and all of that. So that needs to be accounted for when it's reported back to the buy side. And so these are the media metrics that we're able to define. Now moving on to attribution. Attribution was the next section we had. ROAS is the fundamental metric for most retail media networks, and it will remain so. So outcomes need to be attributed to a click or a viewable ad. And as we said, viewable is the key word here, because sponsored product is not always reported on as viewable. And it needs to be associated to specific SKUs that fit within the brand, but more on that later. Retailers should be able to differentiate between click-based and view-based ROAS in their reporting. So now moving on from ROAS, there's look-back windows. Okay, so we've reported on a ROAS, but what's the look-back window for that sale? And we recommended a 30-day post-view or post-click look-back window. The reason we've recommended 30 days is to go as broad as we think is still logical, if you will, and in line with some other industry standards. But retailers need to provide flexible windows, which is the key ask from the brands. So the default, if you log into a UI or you get a report, will be 30 days. But brands should be able to get flexible at any time. Moving on to the next one, there's what are the SKUs that can be attributed? Well, it's the same SKU. Somebody clicked on a 24-pack diaper age 6, very specific SKU. Okay, you report on that same SKU or the parent SKU. So in that diaper example, the 52-pack or the 64-pack, but still same brand, same category. It's diapers, it's not panties or swim nappies or anything like that. But then you go into the brand, right? And all of those other things are then included. And you go up the brand according to the retailer catalog. So how does the retailer define Pampers, One Level Up, all baby diapers? Ideally, in the future, we would like to see a world where the catalog is defined by the brand and not the retailer. And that's something, we'd like to discuss in future iterations of that work. Now, moving on to the next set of standards under attribution, there was sales extrapolation. So we basically said that retailers should disclose when they're extrapolating. We know that not every single user is going to be able to be identified. We live in a privacy-first world, and that is a common understanding amongst everyone. But when there is a level of extrapolation, which will happen, it needs to be disclosed by the retailer as an asterisk or a disclaimer saying, hey, those sales are extrapolated for those reasons. And then next slide, please, Mary Claire. we go into insights, and insights is taking that work slightly further, right? It's saying a shopper who's not purchased any product from a specified brand within a time frame is new to brand. The inverse of that is repeat customers. So a customer that has purchased within a certain time frame is considered repeat. Well, what is that time frame? And that's something that was really hard to agree on, and something the US might adopt, because that definition made a lot of sense to retailers across the pond, if you will. There was what we've defined as 6-week, 26-week, and 12 months. So if it's a regularly purchased item, diapers, going back to my example, shampoo, it will need to fit within that 6-week. If it's a semi-regular purchased item, 26 weeks. And if it's infrequent, 12 months. The next definition we spent some time on is sales uplift and IROAS. What we've done here is really define what is a sales uplift, and saying the exact methodology will vary by retailer, and how they A/B test will vary, but an A/B test needs to happen to say it's incremental. Down the line, we'd like to harmonize a little bit more and have some common methodologies that can be adopted, and that's to come. Sales value can be defined as the growth or the decline of a number of customers, and customers is defined as a spend per customer or the combination of both. So these are some of the common metrics we were able to land on, and everything else we looked at is future. So going into the future and what we want to discuss going forward, there's a couple of things like third-party verification. It's a growing request from brands. How we're going to solve for it, and is there any normalization that needs to be done by the IAB, is something that was discussed in this workshop and will require future consideration, if any. Next, we talked about, Mary Claire, if we don't mind moving on to the next slide, data availability. So sales data needs to be available in real time or near real time. And that's really for performance-led products such as sponsored products. But if you move beyond sponsored products, beyond pure sales data into brand awareness campaigns, it's common definitions are not yet adopted. It's very early days, and retailers are still reporting manually or ad hoc on those campaigns. And it will remain the case for a little bit, but automation needs to come in the future. So just to simplify what I just said, when it's sponsored products, when it's sales metrics, near real time, branding, real time is a future consideration. Now, moving on to the next, there's a lot of topics we want to bring into this conversation. Format standardization is one of them, and it's probably the first one we're tackling. We will have a release soon saying that we are doing this in collaboration with the US. Just a little bit on format standardization. Basically, when you're buying display ads across retailers, mostly on site, those formats are not always IAB standard formats for a reason. IAB standard formats don't really satisfy the needs of retailers. They were built for publishers. We want the buy side to have the ability to buy in a uniform manner across retailers and get standard reporting. And that is something we are looking to tackle in the next couple of weeks. We'll have an exact time frame on release soon, but it will be before the summer. And then there's digital shelf ranking, brand salience. So talking about branding metrics, like I was tapping on earlier, those are still not completely solved for. Audience measurement, in-store measurement is extremely important, especially as retailers are selling omni-channel in the true sense campaign. And then taxonomy structure. So like we were saying, in an ideal world, brands have a uniform catalog and understanding of what a brand and a brand halo means. And that might be something we would take on. The reason we have all of these listed here is because we also want to hear your voice and for you to tell us what to take on next after format standardization. With that, I will open it up to questions if there are any.
Thanks, Yara. Yeah, so if anyone has questions, please pop them in the Zoom Q&A box. I just wanted to go over one point that we've had some feedback on thus far over the last couple of weeks, which is the 30-day look back window, which I appreciate is a I guess slightly controversial topic. But Yara, you kind of alluded to it when you were talking that essentially it's a stake in the ground. It's kind of a point in time which brands can compare apples to apples. But at the end of the day, they do want that flexible attribution possibility as well. So what we're saying is we're not saying you only offer 30 days and that's it. What we're saying is 30 days is almost like a benchmark, and then flexible on top of that, because we know that some retailers are already working to 14 days, whereas some are working to longer windows. So I just wanted to touch upon that, because I know that's come up a little bit over the last couple of weeks when we've been emailing a few people. So Yara, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm just looking to see if I've got any questions. One should give me a second.
So there's one question that is the 30-day look back window standard post view plus post click, or the standard day post click only. So it's post view and post click. If we look back to the definition of ROAS, it touches on both post view and post click, and basically view needs to be viewable, and that's something that took some time to agree on, but I think most retailers have agreed on that.
Yeah. I'm just going to give it a minute, see if there are any other questions come in. I know a couple of people had their hands up, but I don't think we can allow participants to talk in the webinar format. So I do think it's typing in the Q&A box only, I'm afraid, at the moment. I think just quickly, the other thing we've kind of been asked about a few times is certification as well, certification against the standards. And that is something that we are looking into over the next few weeks as IAB Europe, and we'll hopefully have more on that soon. We've had a question about who participated in the workshop. So we had 15 retailers from across Europe and across categories. So we had Amazon, Carrefour, Tesco, Zalando, I'm trying to think who else off the top of my head. Ahold Delhaize, Just Eat, a few others. So it was a good representation, I think, of categories, but also of markets in Europe. So, okay, so a couple of other questions. In what way does the IAB Europe definition apply to digital out of home? It doesn't necessarily at this point in time. We're talking about on site and as Yara said at the beginning, on and off site retail media formats. Why don't we make a different time frame window for regular, semi-regular and infrequent purchases? Yara, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I think Mary Claire is laughing is we did spend quite a bit of time trying to agree on that, and it was really hard, which is why we landed on full flexibility, which should cater to all of these needs, was the 30-day. I think why we were able to land on 3 types of, frequent and frequent for new customers was that the windows were so much bigger. We're talking about a year versus the 30 days for ROAS, and retailers felt like that, giving flexibility on a year will be extremely cumbersome and something they can't really do just from a cost perspective, really processing that data. So it's almost a win to have full flexibility on 30 days. I don't know if you agree, Olivia.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? I'm just going to give it a few more minutes to see if there's any others. And just a reminder that the deadline for public comment is the 29th of March. Do you know if retailers are leveraging customer loyalty data to give brands a view on lifetime value?
It's up to the retailer. It's not something the IAB can, have a point of view on, but generally speaking, from every retailer we've spoken to, they view their loyalty data as a differentiator and will include it when they can, but that's more of a commercial decision.
Yeah. Just going back to the timeline. It's not only 10 days. These are the, as Yara said at the beginning, the standards were released on the 28th of February. So there's been about 4 weeks of public comment. How are media agencies adopting to retail media? That's quite a broad question. I don't know, Yara, what your thoughts are, but I think they are starting to, work with their brands, their clients to help them develop, how they invest in retail media if they're not already. I think I tend to see there's more of a kind of direct brand to retail media network relationship, and agencies are starting to support that relationship. That's how I see it. But Yara, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, agencies, I think all the major holdcos have their commerce desks right now, and they provide, consultancy and advisory on retail media within those commerce desks.
Any more questions on the standards? Some main benefits of retailers coming from standardization and making retail media more transparent. I think investment. I think it would help them to, from the buy side, it will help buy side to scale their investment, and therefore that that means more investment hopefully in the retail media networks essentially, and helps them to answer those, have those conversations with the brands about the measurement and the reporting. I'm going to give it 1 more minute for questions, and now I'm just going to remind people of how they can provide feedback. Okay, another question. Are we sure retailers will give sales or numbers of customers uplift? This could be an issue for them because of the commercial negotiation they have with trade marketing. I'm not quite sure I follow that question. Yara, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if retailers are not adhere to standards that we've released and be compliant, they will need to have a sales indicator, which is the ROAS, right? The return on ad spend number. Are they going to give you individual sales tied to a customer? No, because that will be in violation of privacy standards, but they will give them on aggregate.
Yeah. Is post-view, post-click also the case for sponsored products or only display ads?
It's the case for both. The nuance is sponsored products we've given retailers a year to make sure that their sponsored products viewable are adhering to viewable standards, if you will, viewability standards. Right now, a lot of retailers are treating an impression, whether it's in view or not, as an impression, and they need to make some changes. So we've given it 12 months, and that's clearly outlined. So for them to be adhering to retail media standards, they need to report on viewable ads, whether sponsored products or display.
Yeah, it should already be the case for normal display ads, because that's the standard in display advertising as it is anyway. So, okay, I think we're probably taking enough of everyone's time. So just so everyone's aware, the 29th of March is the last day for feedback. I haven't actually put it on the slide, but we will email everyone afterwards. The email address to send your feedback to is retailmediastandards@iabeurope.eu. I will just pop it in the chat box as well. So yes, if you have any feedback or questions, please email us there with those. And as Yara said, we will be reviewing all of the feedback, consolidating it, and providing a final version for release in April. Exact date TBC, but it will be by the end of April. So, but thank you very much for everyone for taking the time to join. Hopefully that has been useful. Thank you to Yara for walking us through the work and the standards, and hopefully speak to lots of you soon. Thanks, everyone.